I'm Nora, standing in the executive boardroom, the air thick with anticipation. I could hear the pounding of my heart. The silence was only broken by the sound of my heels clicking on the polished floor as I walked up to the presentation screen. The red dress I wore felt like a second skin, empowering me.
Dr.
Ava Reed, the CEO of Summit Healthcare Group and the key decision-maker behind the $12,400,000 contract, sat at the head of the table, her eyes fixed on me. As I prepared to start the presentation, my mind flashed back to the events that led me here. I had been with Horizon Solutions for 7 years, a medium-sized consulting firm. I'd worked myself up from a junior analyst to the head project manager, all through sheer hard work and countless late nights. My family background was modest. I grew up in a small town. My parents were hard, working yet simple people. My father was a mechanic, always teaching me that with dedication, anything was possible. My mother was a nurse, and her kind-hearted nature inspired me to be empathetic in my work. But here, in this corporate world, none of that seemed to matter. 6 months ago, the grant project came up. It was supposed to be my chance to shine, to secure a long-term contract with Summit Healthcare Group that 3 senior managers had already botched. The previous managers, with their prestigious business degrees from well-known universities, had mismanaged the project horribly. They'd over-promised, gathering requirements poorly, and leaving a mess of code that was barely functional. The client was on the verge of walking away. That's when my boss, Lucas Thompson, called me into his office. He had this fake look of concern on his face, just like he was putting on a show. "Nora, you're the only one who can fix this. Your attention to detail, your people skills, we need you," he said, pressing his hands on the desk as if he could transfer the burden physically. I felt proud, like I was finally being recognized. Little did I know I was just a pawn in their game. 3 months before all of this, my relationship with my boyfriend, Ethan, had come to an end. He was tired of me always being chained to my job. One day, he packed his bags and left, taking the little things we had collected together. "You're married to this company, Nora. I hope they treat you better than I feel you've treated me," he'd said as he walked out the door. Then one fateful night, I came back to the office after dinner. I couldn't sleep. My apartment was too quiet. As I walked past the conference room, I heard Lucas and our CEO, Victor Gray, talking. "Once she delivers, we'll let her go," Lucas said. Victor laughed, as if it was the funniest thing in the world, not realizing they were talking about ruining my life after I saved their precious $12,400,000 contract. My hands froze on the door handle, and my heart started pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I should have barged in and confronted them right then. But instead, I backed away silently, went back to my desk, and stared at my laptop screen until the words merged into a blur. With shaking hands, I kept working, just like a good, professional woman was supposed to do. That night, I drove home in tears. But by the next morning, something inside me changed. The pain turned into a determination. The grant project wasn't just any project. It was my ticket to prove myself, and I wasn't going to let them take it away so easily. The next day at work, I arrived earlier than usual. I wore my sharpest black blazer, which made me feel like I was wearing armor. Lucas was already there. When he saw me, he gave me that fake smile. "Nora, just the person I wanted to see. How's the grant project coming along?" My throat tightened, but I managed to say, "On track. The team fixed the integration issues yesterday, and I'm meeting the client tomorrow for review." He patted my back like I was a dog that brought back the newspaper and said, "That's my girl." But now his words tasted like poison. That night, I sat in my living room, surrounded by the empty spaces where Ethan's things used to be. I realized how much my life had been centered around this job, believing that hard work would be rewarded. What a stupid notion. I opened my laptop and started thinking about my options. I could quit right away, but that would be financially disastrous. I could ask the project and let it fail, but it would ruin my reputation more than theirs. Or I could keep doing what I always did, work hard, deliver, and then be discarded like an old piece of furniture. But then I had an idea. I could deliver exactly what they wanted, and make sure I was the only one who fully understood how I did it. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked like a machine. I slept maybe 4 hours a day. I stopped by the office gym just enough to keep up appearances, but every spare moment was dedicated to saving the grant project and documenting everything I did. Lucas checked on me daily, his fake concern getting more and more irritating. "You're working too hard, Nora. We appreciate it, but take care of yourself," he'd say. I'd just smile and nod, thinking how much I wanted to expose his lies. And every time we talked, I recorded the conversation on my phone, just in case. I also started chatting more with Emily from legal. We'd always been friendly, but not close. One day over lunch, I steered the conversation towards employment contracts and terminations. "It's amazing how many managers don't understand the rules about firing employees properly," she said, picking at her salad. I asked her what she meant, and she leaned in and said, "HR is always cleaning up after executives who think they can fire people on a whim. There are strict protocols, especially for employees with your tenure." That night, I reviewed my employment contract with new eyes, making notes about intellectual property, non-compete agreements, and termination procedures. The grant project was coming together beautifully. I redesigned the workflow, simplified the interface, and documented every single step. I built it around a system that only I fully understood. 10 days after overhearing my planned firing, I was presenting the project progress to Victor and Lucas. Victor rarely came to these meetings, but with $12,400,000 on the line, he suddenly took an interest. "The client is very happy with the new direction," I said, clicking through slides showing massive improvements in system performance. "We've fixed the fundamental flaws in the original design." Victor said, "Excellent work, Nora," but his eyes were on the numbers on the screen, not on me. I knew he saw me as nothing more than a tool to be used and thrown away. I continued, "The next phase is crucial. We need to finalize security protocols and complete user acceptance testing. I've prepared a detailed timeline." I handed them folders filled with technical specifications and project plans. Buried in the middle was page 17, a key document that explained my unique implementation method. I knew they wouldn't read it carefully. They never did. That night, I backed up all my work to my personal cloud storage, not to steal, but to protect myself. 4 days before the final deadline, the Summit Healthcare Group executives asked for an in-person meeting to review the final product. Lucas was extremely nervous. "It has to be perfect, Nora. Victor will be there, and the whole board will be watching," he said, pacing around my cubicle. I calmly replied, "Everything is on track." Then he hesitated and said, "I've added Ryan to the presentation team as backup." Ryan was a junior developer who had done nothing for the project. I knew right away what it meant. They were already replacing me. But I kept my voice steady and said, "Great. He can handle the technical questions during the demo." That night, I made my final preparations. I looked at the board meeting agenda that Emily had left on her desk. I confirmed the time, the attendees, and the meeting room setup. I finalized my presentation materials and sent the necessary copies to the executive assistant. Then, for the first time in my career, I left work at 5 p.m. The guard at the front desk gave me a double take. "Early day, Ms. Clark?" he asked. I just smiled and said, "Big day tomorrow. I need to be fresh." At home, I picked out a red dress I'd bought for a wedding but never worn. It made me look bold and confident. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would stand, and the timing of each point. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. The morning of the presentation, I arrived at the office. Lucas was already texting me. "Where are you? We need to prepare." I took my time replying, applying my lipstick in the car mirror. For 7 years, I'd been at their beck and call. Not today. When I walked into the office with a sleek portfolio instead of my usual overstuffed bag, I could feel everyone noticing the change. The red dress, my confident walk. Something had shifted. Lucas was waiting by my desk, checking his watch. "There you are. We need to go over the slides again." "I've made some changes to your presentation," he said. I calmly asked, "What changes?" He slid a USB drive across my desk. "Just some minor adjustments to the message and I've added Ryan as a co-lead in the first 3 slides. I picked up the drive and said, "I'll take a look." He insisted, "Now, please. We present in 2 hours." I replied, "I need to check something with Emily in legal first. The client requested some contract language. I'll be right back." And before he could object, I walked away. I went to the small conference room I'd booked the day before. I locked the door and plugged the drive into my laptop. As I expected, Lucas had completely changed my presentation. My name was hardly visible, Ryan's was everywhere, and the technical details that showed how I'd saved the project were simplified to nonsense. I deleted the file, replaced it with my original presentation, and added a new slide at the end. I then went to the executive boardroom. It was still being set up. I helped the catering staff arrange the coffee and pastries, making small talk and making myself seem like I belonged there. When the AV technician arrived, I introduced myself as the lead presenter and checked my slides. The system was ready, and I sat in a corner, reviewing my notes as the executives and board members started to arrive. Lucas got there 15 minutes before the start. He was panicking when he couldn't find me. When he finally saw me in the boardroom, his eyes widened. "Nora, I've been looking for you everywhere. Did you look at the updated slides?" I nodded and said, "Everything is ready, Lucas. The presentation is loaded and tested." He looked relieved and said, "Perfect. The summit team just arrived. They're in the lobby." As he was leaving, I added, "I kept your changes to a minimum. My original version shows the technical achievement better." He froze and then slowly turned back. "What do you mean?" "I need to see the slides now." I gestured to the AV setup and said, "They're already loaded. There's no time to change them. The board is coming." The boardroom filled quickly. Victor walked in last, flanked by 2 executives from Summit Healthcare Group. I recognized Dr. Ava Reed immediately. She wasn't just a client. She was the one who held the $12,400,000 contract in her hands. I straightened my back and felt the red dress against my skin. For 7 years, I'd been in the background, wearing dull colors. Today, I was going to be seen. Victor began the introductions. "We're very happy to present the completed grant project today. Our team, led by Lucas Thompson, has transformed this project into a state of the art hospital management system that will revolutionize your operations." Not a single mention of my name. Lucas stood up and said, "Thank you, Victor. We're extremely proud of what we've accomplished. I'd like to introduce Nora Clark, who assisted with the project, and Ryan, who was crucial in the technical design." I stood up, smiled, and walked to the presenter's position before either of them could stop me. "Thank you, Lucas. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to show you how we've not only saved but transformed the grant project." I clicked to the first slide, with my name clearly shown as the project lead. Lucas's face tightened, but he couldn't do anything. For the next 20 minutes, I confidently walked them through every aspect of the project. I explained how I'd found the core flaws in the original design, redesigned the workflow, and created an easy-to-use interface. I said, the key innovation was realizing that the previous approach violated 3 core principles of healthcare information systems. I outlined each principle, and Dr. Reed started nodding in approval. Lucas tried to interrupt me twice, but I smoothly acknowledged his points and kept going. Ryan looked more and more uncomfortable, knowing he had no real contribution to the project. "Dr. Reed asked the first direct question, "What about the security concerns our IT director raised last month?" Lucas started to answer, but I jumped in. "An excellent question. If you turn to page 17 in your packets, you'll see our comprehensive security protocol, which exceeds industry standards in 3 critical areas." As everyone shuffled through the materials, I walked them through the protocol. I could see Dr. Reed's expression change from doubt to approval. By the time I got to the final slides, the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. The board members were leaning forward, and the summit executives were impressed. I finished by saying, "We've delivered a system that not only meets your requirements, but will increase operational efficiency by about 34% compared to your current processes. The implementation timeline on page 23 shows we can start next week and finish 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The room erupted in applause from the summit team. Victor was beaming with dollar signs in his eyes, and Lucas looked like he was going to be sick. I asked, "Any questions?"
Dr.
Reed spoke up. "Just one. This is outstanding work, Miss Clark. I'd like you to personally oversee the implementation at our flagship hospital." Before Victor or Lucas could answer, I smiled and said, "I'd be honored, Dr. Reed. But there's something I need to address first." I clicked to the last slide I added the previous night. On the screen, it said, "Project Continuity Concerns." The room went silent. "What's this?" Victor asked, his smile fading. I calmly said, "This is a vital factor for the project's success. As the sole person who designed the revised system, I've documented every part. But there are some details that only I fully understand at this point." Lucas's face turned white. He knew what was coming. I continued, "I recently found out that Horizon Solutions plans to remove me from the project right after this presentation, before the actual implementation, training, or ensuring the system works as promised." Victor stood up and said, "This isn't the time or place." I replied firmly, "This is exactly the right time because it directly affects Summit's $12,400,000 investment."
Dr.
Reed narrowed her eyes and asked, "What exactly are you saying, Miss Clark?" I looked straight at her and said, 10 days ago, I overheard Lucas and Victor discussing plans to fire me after I saved your contract. Their exact words were, 'Let her handle it, then fire her.'" The room was filled with whispers.
Dr.
Reed looked at Victor and Lucas and demanded, "Is this true?" Lucas stepped forward and said, "Nora must have misunderstood what she heard." I quietly pulled out my phone and said, "I have the recording. Would you like me to play it?" The color drained from their faces. They didn't know I hadn't recorded in the office that night, but they knew about the other conversations I'd recorded, and there was enough evidence to make them nervous.
Dr.
Reed turned to Victor and said, "This is very concerning. We're entrusting our entire hospital network to this system. Continuity of expertise is non-negotiable." Victor tried to recover.
Dr.
"Reed, there's been a misunderstanding. Nora is a valuable team member. We were discussing restructuring, but it wasn't about firing her." I interjected, "After working nights and weekends for 6 months to fix the mess your previous managers made?"
Dr.
Reed stood up and said, "I've heard enough, Mr.
Gray.
Our contract clearly requires stable project leadership during implementation and the first year of operation. If Miss Clark designed this system, she needs to oversee its implementation." I waited, watching Victor think. The $12,400,000 contract was on the line against whatever he had planned for me. Finally, he said, his business smile returning, "Nora is essential to the project. There was never any intention to remove her." I turned back to the screen and clicked to a new slide showing the implementation schedule with my name as the lead for every phase. "Then you won't have any problem formalizing my role in the updated contract with guaranteed continuity for the whole project," I said. It wasn't a question.
Dr.
Reed nodded and said, "I insist on it, and I want that addendum drafted today." The meeting ended with forced smiles and handshakes. As the room emptied, Victor grabbed my elbow tightly and hissed, "My office now." I smiled and said, "Of course," after I finish answering Dr. Reed's questions about the implementation timeline. I spent the next 20 minutes with the summit team, building a good relationship. When I finally went to Victor's office, he and Lucas were waiting, their faces angry. Victor demanded, "What the hell was that?" I stood my ground and said, "That was me making sure our most important client's project goes smoothly. You were going to ambush me and fire me after I saved your contract. I just made sure the client knew what that would mean for their investment." Victor leaned forward and said, "What do you want, Nora? A raise? A promotion?" His question caught me off guard. I expected him to be angry, to threaten me, not to negotiate. For a moment, I thought about the director position I'd always wanted, the corner office. But in that red dress, I realized those things belonged to the old me, the one who believed in loyalty and hard, work being rewarded.